Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Emily Stewart, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Duke Human Rights Center at the Franklin Humanities Institute. Thank you for joining us for Voting Rights are Human Rights, our first event this semester. Nancy MacLean will give the official welcome in a moment. Please feel free to send questions throughout the session using the Q&A button, and we will collect the questions for the Q&A at the end of the event. Please feel free to reach out to me directly with any questions about the Duke Human Rights Center or if you want to be added to our listserv. There's a page on our website about voting locally, and a section of our newsletter will include updated voting information each month. We're so glad you're with us tonight, and we look forward to engaging with you this semester through virtual events and programs. Thank you for being here, and I will now turn it over to the DHRC at FHI Executive Committee member, Dr. Nancy MacLean.
So glad to be with you all tonight virtually. We all wish it could be actually, but happy to be with you. I would like to welcome you here to this student faculty teach-in on voting rights are human rights. As Emily said, I'm Nancy MacLean. I'm a member of the Executive Committee of the Duke Human Rights Center, one of the co-sponsors of this event this evening, and I'm also a professor of history and public policy here. And I will be doing the moderating for this fast-paced event. You'll be kind of astonished, I think, at how much we'll be able to share with you in just an hour. Tonight's event, as Emily said, is co-sponsored by the Duke Human Rights Center at Franklin Humanities Institute and by the Sanford School of Public Policy. We'd like to thank both, and I'd also like to extend a special thanks to Emily Stewart, the Assistant Director of the DHRC, for all her work on this and all the other exciting programming we do. I'd also like to thank our speakers, whom my colleague and friend Gunther Peck will be introducing in a moment. And each speaker tonight will speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll take your questions. So I'm delighted to see how many people have registered and joined this event, because we are going to need all the dispersal of sound information and the volunteer commitment that we can muster to have a successful election in 2020 with clear and timely results. I say this as a US historian, and as a historian, I can tell you that our country has never had to conduct an election in the modern era under circumstances as dire for full participation and timely counting as we are facing in 2020. It's not simply the usual challenges that we face in conducting an inclusive election this time, but I think those challenges are also considerable and therefore worth mentioning. Despite being the first self-governing republic in the modern world, whose constitution opens with a ringing invocation of "We the people," our country is actually 138th of 172 democracies in our levels of participation. One reason for that is that historically our country excluded the majority from participation, disenfranchised the majority for a very long time, and has always made registration difficult with place-based residence-based registration, whereas many countries have automatic registration for all citizens. To our usual burdens, this year, others have been added. A spate of laws that have been passed over the last decade to suppress voting in many states, including our own North Carolina. And of course, there is the public health epidemic still raging. The COVID-19 pandemic has spin-off effects we need to be aware of. It's deepened the challenge of registering voters by making canvassing and large events impossible. It's doing this in a context in which some 19 to 23 million people are now at risk of being evicted in the near term, owing to having lost their jobs in the pandemic and the expiration of federal programs to help them. There is also COVID-19's extreme danger for elderly Americans, which has decimated the number of poll workers, most of whom have traditionally been retired people. And we face serious potential for delays in delivering and counting mail-in ballots by a postal service that is now presided over by a political appointee who is hostile to its operations and continued existence. And last but not least, Facebook, where nearly 1/2 of the top performing posts about voting by mail were false or misleading, according to a recent study by a public citizen. In short, never has it been more important to get accurate information out to the public and to register as many people as possible, as soon as possible, to make sure that we can have an inclusive election with clear results in what will now be election week, not election day. Why does this matter so much for students? Because every issue this generation is concerned about, by large majorities, will be on the ballot in November. Action on the climate crisis, ending systemic racism, passing immigration reform, dealing with economic inequality, ensuring healthcare and reproductive justice, and that's just to name the headliners. So that's why Duke faculty and students have come together tonight to make sure that everyone on campus has the information we need to make our voices count and to make our votes count. So with that, I'll hand things over to my colleague, Gunther Peck, Professor of History and Public Policy and Director of the Hart Leadership Program, who will introduce our speakers. Gunther, take it away. And after all the speakers have their chance to share their concerns with you, we'll then turn to a question and answer period, and I will step back to moderate that. Gunther.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much for helping organize this really important teach-in and the opportunity for us as a community at Duke to reflect together on how we make democracy. And this is true in every election. It's never more true now. So I want to just, before I introduce the speakers, I do want to say one thing that I think I've been thinking a lot about, and my dear colleague Wesley Hogan, the Center for Documentary Studies, has come out with a book recently in which she highlights the role, the leadership of young people historically in really building our democracy, and leadership that has really been unrecognized. And she describes it as a kind of victim of adultism, in which people who think they know how to run democracy condescend to young people time and again and miss the insights that they have already figured out. I think it's never more appropriate to think about that in this moment, because indeed young people are leading democratic action in the streets for justice, and also have been doing so before George Floyd was murdered. And we have a terrific opportunity at Duke to think about how young and old, how we make democracy together. So I also want to just observe something as a lifelong democracy worker, that one thing that has inspired me about the past and the present is that students do know how to organize, and student-to-student organizing, relationship organizing, is what has really built and created the opportunities that young people have generated. And so this is a kind of a challenge to all the students who might be listening. It is to take yourselves actually very seriously, to recognize that you do quite literally hold with us the fate of our democracy and in our hands together, whether it's going to be working as young poll workers, showing up, keeping our precincts open, organizing your peers to be heard, or voting in any way you can. So that's just the encouragement. But before I say any more, I do want to introduce, we have fantastic student speakers and also a terrific organizer who will be presenting. First, Rachel Spring from You Can Vote, which is really the premier voting rights organization in our state and is helping lead the Carolina Challenge that we are part of. Rachel is the Triangle Campus Coordinator, and she's going to address the how, the when, and the where of voting, how we do that. And it's actually really complicated, but very important given the fact that Duke students are actually in many time zones. She will be followed by the first of three students, Bryant Lewis, who is a senior, will be speaking on the topic of why do we vote? And I know Bryant had the pleasure of working with him this past spring in the Why Vote Challenge, which he helped lead. In the Why Vote Challenge, he will mention, but it is an opportunity not only for your voice as a student to be heard and to persuade someone to vote who would not vote. And that contest is ongoing at the Heart Leadership Program. Bryant will be followed by another student that I had the pleasure of working with this summer, Mohammed Khitami, who, along with a team of students working in a project called Elections in the Pandemic, came up with a way to use chatbot to really organize students and to get them to network, to get the information they need, and to really use technology and programming. He's a technology whiz, to think about how we can improve our democracy and the way it functions. He will speak on why do we collaborate and organize. And finally, another student of mine who I am really honored to know, Lauren Howell, will be speaking. Lauren is also a senior. I'm sorry, Mohammed is a junior. Lauren is a senior in the public policy school and has been very active. She was in democracy work. She also, this summer, has had the remarkable opportunity and blessing for us in becoming one of the most remarkable leaders of a democracy movement in Raleigh to end police brutality. I think she protested 56 days in a row. And she already had a powerful voice, but really found her voice for a larger community. And she is going to speak on the topic of how do we build justice together. Each will speak for 5 minutes. And I should say each of these students very much crafted their own words, and I really look forward to hearing from them, learning from them, and then engaging them. So thanks very much also to the Human Rights Center and to Robin Kirk, Emily Stewart, Nancy MacLean, and Erica Weinthal for helping put this together. It's an honor to be collaborating here. So, Rachel, why don't you take it away, and I will enjoy listening. Rachel Spring.
I'm going to be talking about the logistics side of voting this year. So we're going to start with the basics. Who can register and vote in North Carolina? So you have to be a U.S. citizen, be 16 years old to pre-register, and 18 by election day to vote, and not currently serving the terms of a felony sentence, including probation and parole. And this last one is a big misconception in North Carolina. You only lose the right to vote while you're serving the terms of a felony sentence. As soon as you finish those terms, your right to vote is automatically restored. As well as people who are serving the terms of a misdemeanor sentence never lose the right to vote. They can even vote absentee from jail. So a lot of people are disenfranchised by just not knowing about their rights. So that's one common misconception that I like to talk about. Next, I want to go over, for students, your options for registering to vote. You can register at your campus address or at your home address. Students have the right to choose where they want to vote. So that can be on campus, off campus, at your parents' house. It's up to you. You just need to decide where you're going to vote and make sure that you have a plan in place. And that also goes for students who have been removed from North Carolina, from Duke, due to the pandemic, you still have the right to vote in Durham. So you can still stay registered in Durham at your campus address if that's where you want to vote. So we're going to talk about how to register to vote. The North Carolina State Board of Elections launched an online portal through the DMV to register to vote. The catch with this is that you have to have a North Carolina ID and you have to know your social security number. So a lot of students out of state don't have North Carolina IDs. And if you want to register in North Carolina, you still can. You just can't use this online portal that they've provided for us. So that brings me to an option that we have on our website at youcanvote.org/register. You can, if you don't have an ID or know your full social security number, you can fill out as much information as you can on our website. And we at You Can Vote will actually mail you that voter registration form with your information filled out. All you have to do is sign it, and it comes with an envelope that has the address already filled out for the Board of Elections, and it already has postage on it. So all you have to do is sign it and put it back in the mail. It'll go to the Board of Elections and get you registered. So that's one option that we are trying to cut out a few of the barriers for people to register to vote touch-free in this pandemic. So I would encourage you to check out our website. We can also help you register through the DMV portal. Now to talk about how to vote. There are 3 ways to vote in North Carolina. You can vote early, you can vote on election day, or you can vote by mail, which is obviously a hot topic right now. But I'll start with talking about early voting. We have 17 full days of early voting here in North Carolina. This year it's October 15th through 31st. So during early voting, you can go to any polling place in your county. There's no wrong precinct for you to go to. And we also have same-day voter registration. So if you walk into an early voting site, you can register and vote the same day, as well as update any problems that there may be with your voter registration. So that's a great option. There are fewer crowds, there are generally no lines, and you have 17 full days to get it done. You can vote on election day, which you have to go to your assigned polling location. You will get turned away or asked to fill out a provisional ballot if you go to the wrong precinct. And we do not have same-day voter registration on election day, so you have to already be registered to vote. So we like to think of election day as a last resort for voting. Now, for voting by mail, it's a great option for a lot of people, but I do want to encourage people to be careful when voting by mail and to read all the instructions. It's a 2-step process. You have to request the mail-in ballot, and then when you get the ballot, you have to fill it out, have a witness sign it, and mail it back. So we encourage people to be careful and diligent when they're voting by mail. It can be really great, but it's for the people who are willing to go that extra step to make sure that their vote is counted. With your mail-in ballot, you can also take it to an early voting site and drop it off, hand it to a poll worker, and your vote will be counted that way. Or you can take it to the Board of Elections or mail it to the Board of Elections. So you do have a couple options that way. And I will also mention that the State Board of Elections is launching an online portal to request an absentee ballot. So that I believe is launching tomorrow, so stay tuned for that and check it out if you wanted to request an absentee ballot. It kind of cuts out a step of mailing in the request form and getting the ballot later. So I would encourage people to stay on the lookout for that. And there's all this information and a lot more at our website at youcanvote.org, so definitely go check that out. And I'll be here for questions at the end. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it off to the next speaker, Bryant Lewis.
Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Bryant Lewis. I'm a senior pre-med studying evolutionary anthropology with minors in chemistry and theater arts. And at the beginning of this year, I joined Professor Peck and a team of students to accomplish a promotional video for the Why Vote video challenge run by the Heart Leadership Program. And the objective of the challenge was that students would produce a creative 30-second video meant to inspire their peers to vote in the upcoming election. And the job of myself and the team was to produce a video explaining the competition, give background on the power of youth voter engagement, and to show how students can collaborate. And what moved me about this experience is that I became the object of my own persuasion. I stepped into the experience particularly concerned about the acting, but came out much more aware of why voting is so important. The character I played in the video was a college student, extremely apprehensive to step out of the academic bubble and engage in politics. And this was not too dissimilar from where I was about 1 year ago. I wasn't old enough to vote for the previous presidential election, and I wasn't inclined enough to leave campus to vote in the midterms. My previous separation from politics stems from the fact that I grew up in a partisan household, having parents who are on both sides always presented me with a very negative view of politics. And it was just always easiest for me to avoid the topic altogether. And like myself, many people exist who sense the combative nature of the political parties and feel completely burnt out by it. At the same time, there's a whole other array of reasons why individuals don't politically engage, including corruption in our government, distrust of the voting system, voter suppression, gerrymandering, lack of knowledge on candidates, and several other reasons. And each of these reasons is so valid because it truly can be exhausting to fight against these issues, not to mention when we're living through an epidemic and a financial crisis. But we still have to continue to instill agency in our peers and our communities despite those things. And in doing so, we might be faced with some hard questions. For example, how do I tell my first-gen friend who rejects politics to vote when states deliberately deny immigrant participation in the political system? Or how do you tell a trans Black woman to vote when time and time again, her rights are toyed with and diminished by the highest officials of our nation in both parties? Or how do you tell a 65-year-old to mail in their ballot to avoid the polls during a pandemic when they see that tens of thousands of ballots are either missing or being rejected? These are all very valid sentiments based off of real unjust experience. So when we attempt to organize, we often might ask ourselves, who am I to speak to the decisions of these individuals who have repeatedly been let down by this grossly flawed system? So we have to first understand why people don't vote before we start preaching to them why they should vote. And then we can respond that ultimately voting is not about the individual, but about reforming the entire administration put into power that has immense jurisdiction over our lives, which is why it's not just the presidential election that matters, but also local and state elections, because it's those officials who impact and shape our experiences. And as a Black man, it saddens me that I spent so long ignoring how the system around me worked, especially when we live in a country plagued by prejudice and brutality towards people of color. How could I not participate when people who look like me are being killed every day? And one moment that amplified my personal agency occurred only a few months ago when I attended a Black Lives Matter protest. I stood with a megaphone in my hands in the pouring rain, screaming to the predominantly white population in my segregated hometown of Long Island, to the point where I had no voice left. But it was deeply moving to feel the solidarity of that organizing and the unity in demanding justice for Black lives. And I don't want to raise my kids in a world where they have to march down streets declaring that their lives matter. So that's my why vote, or just one part of it. But to conclude, we cannot be complacent in this election. We can't assume that someone will or will not win because we saw how that worked out last time. Change shouldn't have to be made by individuals when we have an opportunity to amplify our voices by attacking the polls together. In 2016, only 56% of Duke students voted in the presidential election, and I know that we can do better than that, and I vow to be a part of it. We don't all have to be activists, but we should all at least be participants. And so to everyone, if you want your voice to be heard, vote. To my fellow peers, if you want to share your message and your reason for voting, you can still join the Why Vote video competition, which is running with your 30-second video or less by October 8th. We need to hear from every student and every citizen. Thank you.
Hey everyone. Hi. So my name is Khitami, and also thanks Gunther for the generous intro. I like the tech whiz part. That was nice. But yeah, I'm a junior studying electrical and computer engineering, as well as public policy, and I'm hoping that by the end of the discussion, we'll have a better understanding of how we can use our experiences and interests to mobilize and succeed. So back in 2015, during my sophomore year of high school, actually, I was obsessively following the development of an indie software engineer and his innovative gaming project called Stardew Valley. So Stardew Valley is what players would call a spiritual successor to a whole genre of simulation role-playing games. And without getting into too much detail, it's just a life simulator where you can farm, go fishing, build a home, become part of a community, and even get married. And the game can truly go on forever. So somehow, despite its endless features, beautiful art and graphic design, and the completely original soundtrack and in-depth gameplay mechanics, the game was advertised to be developed by just one person. But as I was following the development cycle, I genuinely thought that point about the game was some magical triumph of dedication. But after reading up more closely on the development cycle, I learned that Eric Baroni, who was like the lone engineer behind the project, wasn't really alone at all. He was dedicated and he was a hard worker, but a large part of his success and his capability to develop the game on his own came from support from the indie community, from donations, from free online engineering courses, and because of inspiration from previous successful games like Harvest Moon and Animal Crossing. And this story has left a lasting impression on me, and to a large extent, it continues to influence how I kind of operate today, with the belief that you can always find people to collaborate with. So this past summer, I organized with a group of students to build a website called Act 4. And it's a platform that aims to streamline the process of action by highlighting activists' work and encouraging engagement. Not only do we bring the information to one place, but we also designed an interface to take a number of actions on a variety of issues. So if you want to pressure Congress, boycott and email companies, or donate to organizations, you can select an issue you really care about, and we'll provide you with the means to do that. Most recently, we've begun outlining our elections page, which is just a large database of ongoing campaigns that identifies each candidate's stance on a variety of issues. It's a pretty useful idea, but it's one whose scope and potential is very overwhelming. Should we cover just national elections? Should we cover the ever-changing, congressional elections? And are we even qualified to speak on, those local elections in communities that we don't really have a connection to? And when we enter this uncharted territory where we might not have a solution initially, we have to understand that we organize and collaborate and work in teams because it helps us build on the work that's already present in our community. So unless we're putting together our resources and getting help, a project like Act 4 and the election page just wouldn't happen. I also spent a large part of my summer working with Dr. Peck and two other students, as we mentioned, on a solution to maximize voter participation in the upcoming election cycle. So we researched the efficacy of a ton of solutions, and ultimately we decided to use machine learning to train a voter registration chatbot. So we decided that if we could make a chatbot that is completely understanding of the questions and needs and apprehensions of a voter, then registration and participation, especially during a pandemic, could be preserved and perhaps even increased. So given my experience as an engineer, I worked on the coding, training, and testing for both of these projects that I've mentioned. And without collaboration on research and content for these projects, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere. Voting, especially in our current climate, is a process that needs to be kickstarted, I think, and promoted. So we always talk about how beneficial collaboration is, but I feel like, especially with pushing for voting, we often forget how, the gravity of just how influential an organized effort can be. Even if it's through fringe support, like in the case of Stardew Valley, or through a Basque Connections research team, like in my case. We need to make a tangible effort to sort of improve voter participation. Regardless of your specialty, organizing for civic engagement should definitely be a special priority today. Like if you look at me, I'm an engineer whose biggest interests are virtual reality, augmented reality, and game development. But when you put me on a team with researchers and policy enthusiasts, you get this powerful impact on voter participation. So in Stardew Valley, as I was talking about it, you succeed when you collaborate and share and interact with community members and neighbors. And this game mechanic was coded with the mindset that we organize toward a goal, and when we collaborate, the results are significantly more impactful. We all have skills, talents, and creativity that feed the collaborations that will make our democracy better, stronger, and more resilient. I've learned that firsthand just from what I've talked about. And it's truly rewarding to be a part of that solution. So that's all from me. I'll stay to the end as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Howell now. Thank you.
There we go. Hi, you all. So Brian and Mohammed touched on the importance of mobilization, and I want us to think about the daily work that we do versus the capacity we have to actualize the future we wish to see in this country. So although the time of political performances through symbolism and diversity and inclusion initiatives has led to significant improvements, it will never be enough to dismantle a system in which it's considered radical to affirm that my life matters. I want to remind you all that in a country that demands that there must be freedom and justice for all, and that we all pursue life, liberty, and we are the ones who are indeed the home of the brave, and we are the only ones who have the ability to make this country great. Nothing is radical about that. In fact, it's inherent to the core of our democracy, which has been obstructed by those attempting to tear us apart. Bryant, I really know the feeling of screaming so much that your voice physically hurts and you're wondering when you're going to get it back, especially in the rain. And sometimes it does feel empowering. Other times it feels completely humiliating. Over the summer, the North Carolina General Assembly passed SB 168, which, if signed by Governor Cooper, would have prevented the public from having access to medical examiner records while in police, prison, and jail custody, a direct attack on the movement for Black lives. And on the day that we found out about this, we had been marching for months, and we had a climate restorative justice event planned for the evening. Following its conclusion, we asked the community to immediately mobilize for the occupation in front of Governor Cooper's house until he vetoed it. That happened 7 days later after constant police harassment. And we didn't even think about it when we decided it. We made the decision in 5 minutes and made it happen. There are some who told us that it was pointless every single day, but we continued doing it because what other option did we have? We often find ourselves in a moment without options because we all have yet to demand that they be given to us. Freedom has never come without a fight. Currently occupying the White House is a man who figuratively kills people of color through coronavirus infection and incitement of racial violence. And despite everyone's amnesia, we have known his character since day one with the Muslim ban. Of course, the entire election has been an embodiment of white privilege, and people haven't acknowledged the difference between political opinion and racism, queerphobia, sexism, and overall stupidity. The second candidate, however, has written a mass incarceration crime bill, continues to ride the coattails of token Black people, and give more funding to the police, and that we are all monolithic, and if we do not give him our vote, we are not Black. On the streets, I have faced many who are dismayed, asking me, what's the point? Women expressing their disappointments with accusations of both candidates. They're never going to listen to the Black and brown, whether or not they're blue or red, they tell me. And to that I say, despite what our president says, ignoring something does not make it go away. If we ignore the corruption with our dual political system, it will not disappear. If we don't participate, we are literally giving up. And if we don't fight, who will? This is the same thing I scream as I'm yelling the names of those murdered by Raleigh Police Department. If we don't make this get national attention and say their names, how will we get justice if our system is broken? Who will fix it? Do we expect the same people that broke it to? Their families have been fighting for years, and as a part of their community, it is our duty to stand with them. I asked them, will y'all say my name? Although frustration with the political system is complete, we must fight for justice on the streets, with our votes, on our jobs, and in our daily conversations, because this beast of a system will take the work of all of us. And despite the generational trauma, feeling like we've been ignored for 400 years, some groups of people even longer, we are really forcing their hand. In just the short time that I've been protesting, all of Raleigh's Confederate statues have fallen. They've adopted 8 can't wait policies, opened up internal investigations, and decided to send social workers with the police. Is this enough for me? Of course not, because until all are free, we all cannot be. And what would I say, however, to my trans brothers and sisters and non-binary folk in response to why I didn't vote? Their angers and frustrations are even more justified than mine when we have a president repealing transgender protections on the anniversary of polls. What will I say to the ancestors who were mauled by dogs, raped, beaten, and murdered for the right to vote, and still for candidates who essentially believed that their lives did not matter? Did we forget Woodrow Wilson showed the birth of a nation in the White House? Did we forget Nixon's dog whistle racism? Did we forget Reagan's as well? No. Our lack of acknowledgement of the weight of their vote is missed by lack of representation of Black history in schools. But once again, that's something that we can change with our local elections. As Duke students, predominantly white and wealthy, we cannot live in a bubble. With a week left in the 2018 midterms, only 5 Duke students had voted. Now is the time where we're forming very strong coalitions. The Sunrise Movement is the movement for Black lives, is ICE abolition, is voting for healthcare, is affordable education, is the Poor People's Campaign, is You Can Vote. So let's do it. The revolution will happen either with or without you, but with your power, we are even stronger. We each have the power inside of us because we are reclaiming it. So let's use it for justice with our walk, talk, and with our vote, because it's definitely the bare minimum. Thank you all.
I'm Erica Weinthal, and I'm one of the co-directors of the Duke Human Rights Center at the Franklin Humanities Institute. And I'm just gonna take a few minutes in between these tremendous speakers who are incredibly inspiring. And before we turn it back over to Nancy MacLean for questions, if I could, I would love to applaud and thank all of the speakers for their wonderful comments and inspiring us to vote. Part of the impetus for this event tonight was to really focus on protecting the Duke community's ability to vote in this election, which is like no other election that we have seen. And what we've done at the Human Rights Center has really been trying to make a case for educating the broader public about why we need to ensure access for the entire community to vote in a safe way, given that we will be voting during the conditions of a pandemic. And I don't know, I think we were going to show a screenshot, but I don't see it. But I'll just mention, oh, here it comes. Okay. The members of the faculty of the Duke Human Rights Center Board, the Faculty Advisory Board, drafted a letter to the Chronicle asking the Duke administration to take specific steps to secure and protect our voting rights. And you can read this article in the Chronicle, but this was really just one of our first steps in a series of events for this fall. And in this letter, the things we ask for are just very plain and simple. Making voting accessible to all the staff during early voting, giving people time off to go and vote, allowing the Duke community to serve as poll workers, because it's really important to staff the polls during early voting and during election day. Providing clear, accessible guidance, having a really good set of communication to the Duke community, which is happening. So I would like to encourage people to look at the website Duke Votes, also look at the Duke Human Rights Center's webpage. We have information posted there too. And then also encouraging, I'm faculty, I'm encouraging my students, where we're scheduling class on election day. We want to give students time off to vote, and also staff and faculty. The last thing I want to say is what makes all of this work are the students you've seen tonight speaking. They're really what inspires us at the Human Rights Center and gives us, keeps us on our toes and continuing to do the work to ensure that voting rights are human rights. And I would like to encourage, if there are students listening who would like to be involved, please reach out to Emily Stewart, who's kicked this off tonight, about the possibility of joining the Student Advisory Board, or to attend additional events that we'll be hosting this fall. We have an Indigenous Rights series that will be continuing this fall. We will be hosting a book launch for one of our members for Bob Korstat's new book on fragile democracy. And with that, I want to turn it back over to Nancy MacLean. I think she's probably had time to look at the questions and to start the Q&A section, the part of what's going to follow next. And please continue to send in your questions.
Thank you so much, Erica. And thank you to Bryant and Mohammed and Lauren for your really, really important and inspiring remarks. I think all three of you conveyed something that probably everyone on this call feels, and frankly, everyone in this country, whatever your political affiliation, I don't think anybody thinks our politics are working in an optimal way now. But I am really moved and inspired by the fact that all across the country, there are groups organizing and working hard for structural democracy reform right now, for things like automatic voter registration, to end partisan gerrymandering so that voters choose their elected officials and not elected officials their voters, to stop the dark money in politics and ensure transparency so we don't have the kind of corrupting influences that all three of the students speakers were talking about, and that leaves so many wondering if their votes matter. In this election, of all elections, your votes really matter, because there are so many who have been putting shoulder to the wheel to ensure that the first thing on the agenda after this election is structural democracy reform, which I think Americans of all persuasions are interested in. So I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to the students for raising those tough issues that we all need to consider, and then open the question and answer period. I will take the first question, since I was the one who put out the notion of election week rather than election day. And this is actually something that comes from the National Task Force on Election Crises. And I would encourage people who are interested to check that out. But there is a bipartisan commission of people who know a great deal about how we run elections, what kinds of problems arise, what needs to be done. And they are all saying that in these COVID conditions, where so many people will be voting by mail, where we may face shortages of poll workers in some place, all those different things, we shouldn't expect that it will be like a normal American election where we will, at the end of election night, we will know who the victor is. And that's important because counting every vote is critical to having an honest, fair, inclusive election. But because of the COVID conditions, that may take several days. It may take even longer, and we need to allay public concern that might arise to say there's something wrong with this, when in fact it is just a careful, diligent, methodical counting of the many expected mail-in ballots. So again, if you want more information on that, you could go to the website of the National Task Force on Election Crises, who are talking about these issues, and will be soon sharing many materials with the public and with election officials out in the states and local communities. With that said, we have another question that says, if you've already registered to vote in your home state, but would like to register to vote in North Carolina, will you be able to change your registration information? The answer to that is absolutely yes, but let me go to Rachel Spring to explain to you how exactly to do that, because I'm sure that's something that many Duke students will want to do, because this is where you're building your life, right? You're here for 4 years. This is an important local community. It needs your input. And there are pressing issues, as Lauren especially said, issues about police accountability, issues about education, issues about public transit, all kinds of things that need the voices of Duke students and other students in the community. So Rachel, what do you do if you had originally registered in another state, but you want to vote in North Carolina?
Yeah, so short answer, yes, absolutely. You can re-register in North Carolina. I'm assuming if you're out of state, you don't have a North Carolina ID, which means you're not eligible to use the DMV portal to register. So you'll have to use a paper form to register. So you can either print one out yourself, fill it out, and send it to the Board of Elections, or you can go to our website, youcanvote.org/getregistered. And we can send you one that already has the Board of Elections address filled out and already has prepaid postage. So those are your options for registering.
Great. And we have another question that you're a resident expert on, which is, if Duke were to send students home, or in other North Carolina campuses to do the same, will votes of students still count in North Carolina if they're home in a different state? I think, again, the answer is yes, but you can explain it better than I.
Yes, you can still vote in North Carolina. The difference would be you have to go the extra step and request an absentee ballot to get sent to your home address and send it back before the election to get counted. You also have the option to re-register in your home state or your home county. But yes, you just have to decide where you want your vote to count and make a plan.
Great. And I'm hearing from Eric Lynn from the Duke Engage, saying that he's heard some conflicting opinions that students may need an intent to return to campus. So that's important. But I think most students do want to return to campus as soon as it is safe to do so. Bob Corstat, a professor of public policy and history who just retired this year, is saying that all of the young people who participated tonight have been incredibly impressive, and he wants to know if you have ideas about how you can help motivate old generations, particularly in your home communities. Have you done any kind of outreach like that, folks? Lauren, Bryant, Mohammed?
Yeah, I can answer this. I think that there's always an issue that's affecting, especially if you're talking to your community, then you often know the issues that are impacting your community. And I think that my experience with like people in older generations is them saying that, it's always the same thing. Like, we've been fighting, now you're fighting, like we're tired of fighting. And that's like completely justifiable and understandable, but I would just remind them, like, especially to not forget the weight of what this moment means, and that like this moment is actually like a movement towards something, and that we have a lot of potential, especially right now, that we haven't had in the past, frankly. And also like the politics that we have right now is like, we're in a global pandemic, which is unprecedented. Like, we haven't had the experience of having to wear masks in public all the time. And that is like an issue that directly affects older people. Like, I believe the average poll worker age in North Carolina is 70 years old, which means we like really need young people, but that doesn't mean that we also don't need them to show up to vote. So I would just kind of encourage them to think about like, yes, I understand it's been frustrating over time, but think about like this moment and the potential that we have right here, right now, and like what issues are affecting us right now that we can change, I would say.
Great. I am going to ask Gunther to come in for the next question because he's been working very closely with the Duke administration to help develop methods to facilitate voting on campus and make those available to students. So the question is from Ameo Rao, who asks, how can we ensure that Duke students wishing to vote by mail can do so successfully? Many first-year students may not know the specifics of how to receive and send mail at Duke, and therefore there doesn't seem to be a central resource for students to get this information. Gunther, could you talk about some of the resources that are developing now at Duke for informing students about how they can vote, whether by mail or in person?
Sure. First of all, I would point every student to the Duke Votes site. It's a terrific site. It has essentially there for you several scenarios, and it depends on where you are living now, where you are registered, and how to maintain access to the ballot. The question about mail is obviously crucially important. People want to vote safely. I think the thing that I would encourage and the Duke administration supports, their job is to give us as many options as students need. Your job as students, though, is to really make sure that you vote early, which is to say that you organize, you have a vote plan that doesn't wait for the 9th hour. Like, and this is key because every single election I've seen it do, when we have an early vote site, you all remember this. The last day of early voting, the Saturday before Election Day, there'll be 5, 10, 50 awesome Duke undergrads running in their underwear to the early vote station and registering and voting in the 9th hour. And by luck and by grace, they managed to get their votes in. Not a good plan this year. Why? Because we might be sent home. You might be sent home. So if you are here, the best way to have your vote count is to vote early, which starts October 15th. Given the fact we might be sent home, I'm advising students and others to request an absentee ballot if you're registered in North Carolina, because you can then have that as your backup if you get sent home. If you want to vote in North Carolina, you need to have a kind of both be part of your plan. Now, some people have said, well, you're not going to vote twice. That would be a felon. You can't vote twice. But you want to have the ability to vote. And if you're sent home and you haven't requested that absentee ballot, then it gets harder. You can request an absentee ballot, and I think Rachel knows this better than I think up until October 26th. So that's pretty late in the game, but again, don't wait. You can request an absentee ballot September 1 by going on to the State Board of Elections site. There's a portal, you click it, and you'll get your ballot sent. So people in the State Board of Elections are doing their best this election also to make sure that absentees are counted. And there's a new provision which allows them to open and count ballots 5 weeks before the election so it doesn't pile up after the election. So there is some safeguarding that we're trying to see happen. I would also say one of the things that Duke students can do, and others have said this, this is again me recommending it. You have to be mindful of safety, obviously, if you're a poll worker, but we need young poll workers, just clear. We need them everywhere across the state. And if we don't have young poll workers, our polls will have to close, in-person voting. And that, we need both systems to be as vibrant as they can in order to have it work. There's something called the Democracy Heroes on the State Board of Election website. You can sign up and get paid $200 for working on election day. So too much info, but anyway, it's a key.
Don't go away, because there's another question, a follow-up question about those poll workers from Hannah Rogers. I don't know if that's the Hannah Rogers I used to have in class, who is a future governor of Nevada. But be that as it may, it's a Hannah Rogers who asks, how can I get trained to be a poll worker in North Carolina? So do you want to share that information too?
Sure. So there is if you go to the State Board of Elections website in North Carolina's State Board of Elections, it's called Democracy Heroes, and it's a portal, and you click on it. You just search it, and I've got it. We at the Heart and several faculty have that information. You click on it. You find out when the training is. It's a virtual training. It takes 4 hours, and then you can work in any of the precincts in the county in which you are registered. So that said, there are stipulations. If you're a Duke student currently on campus, you're not allowed, because of the travel. The Duke Compact would prevent you from going home if you're in Salisbury or in Concord or down east, from going and working as a poll worker and then returning to campus. So if you're living in Durham, you can work in Durham now. If you're home already in Concord and want to be a poll worker there, then you can do that. Well, because of the Duke Compact, because of COVID-19, we are not wanting Duke students to travel back and forth, because that would be jeopardizing what the Duke Compact, its spirit and intent. So, but great question.
Excellent, thank you. Another question was, how can we pressure the university so that Election Day is a holiday for everyone? Or at least, that would be great. And if failing that, we should at least make sure that staff are paid, get paid time, are able to have paid time off so that they can get to the polls. So do you want to talk about that, Erica? Maybe say a little bit about how other departments, organizations, students might help with the letter that the Duke Human Rights Center created?
I mean, just share it. Talk to your faculty, talk to your deans, make noise. I mean, everybody should have the opportunity to vote in a very safe manner. And that's really what we want to ensure, is that people aren't penalized for exercising their right to vote. So yeah, leave it there.
That's great. A wonderful question that's just come in. What about sources for voter education? This is especially important for races other than president. And I'll say here that Rachel Spring does classroom visits, and I had her to my classes in a past election, and I know she is terrific about providing that information in a nonpartisan way about down ballot races, but also educating us all about the importance of local races and state races, and realizing how much of our lives are determined by decisions made at the local and state levels. So Rachel, could you tell folks how to get information about the down ballot races and the issues on those, and how to find out about the candidates?
Yeah, so the first resource that I'll plug is on our website. It's youcanvote.org/WOB. That stands for What's on the Ballot. And this is a tool that lists major issue areas like healthcare and criminal justice. And then when you click on an issue area that you care about, it lists every race that's on the ballot that has to do with that issue area. So it starts from local elections like soil and water conservation board, things that people have never heard of. And then it works its way up to state level, like the General Assembly, and then up to the national elections. So it really breaks down how the issues that you care about connect to what you're seeing on your ballot and how it impacts your everyday life, and also really focuses on down ballot races. And then the other resource that we always like to mention is Vote411.org. This is put on by the League of Women Voters, and it has candidate information for every race, and it's a really good way to be informed about who is running for these offices that you've never even heard of before. So I would definitely recommend checking them out.
Thank you so much. And there's also a question about how UNC, NC State, and Eastern Carolina University will adapt to students being sent home and to classes being moved online. And I think the answers from Gunther and earlier Rachel to the questions about Duke apply to those other institutions too. So it's really the same thing there. Here's a big question as we're nearing the end. Do any of the panelists have ideas about how we can encourage people who believe their vote doesn't matter anyways, since their individual vote almost certainly will not make a difference in the outcome of the election? I think there are definitely people here who could talk about just how close elections get and have gotten in recent years, and how much the act of voting matters as for civic commitment. But let's see, anybody want to raise hands to join in on that question about why your individual vote matters for people who are feeling dispirited and like it doesn't? I think the best thing to do for panelists to do is just raise your hand so I know you want to jump in. Oh, okay, Lauren.
Yeah, I was going to say that some really good statistic that stuck with me from You Can Vote, I believe it was in 2016 that 95 local elections in North Carolina were decided by 5 votes. So yeah, there's another one from, I believe the other one is from maybe 2015 that 35 elections decided by 1 vote. So especially like at the local level, it really is important because people don't vote at the local level. So like, I would hammer that in, especially in North Carolina, that our elections do end up being very close, and that most certainly like your individual vote does have an impact. I don't know.
Yeah. And also so many important things are decided at the local level, like the policing issues that you were talking about, races for district attorney, school spending, so many quality of life issues are local. So those individual votes matter a huge amount. So there is also another question that was specifically for Lauren, but I want to pose it to all the student speakers. You are very committed to this work. You've been putting in a lot of energy. Sometimes it can feel dispiriting, particularly Lauren, it's aimed to you for all the days that you spent protesting in Raleigh. How do you keep going? I'm going to broaden it to, as take care of yourself while you advocate for disenfranchised communities, but also, maybe all of the featured speakers could close out by saying, what inspires you to keep going with this work and what sustains you in doing it, because that could help other people, because we certainly are going to need so many more volunteers to make this election a success. So your comments will help others. Brian?
Yeah, I think one thing, and kind of to piggyback off what I said previously, is that I came from a background of not really being very engaged, and I was one of those people once upon a time, but it was really just surrounding myself with like-minded people, and especially this year, taking time out for yourself. If you are protesting, if you are organizing, that we can't all do this by ourselves. We need to stand together, and we have to remind not only ourselves, but our peers that, this fight is not over. It's not over in November. It won't be over next year and not the year after, but it's it's an ongoing, fight that we all have to be a part of. So it is exhausting, but, what's more exhausting is dealing with the country that can't really fix itself. And that's kind of the job that we have to embark on.
Others? Mohammed or Lauren, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry. I just disconnected for a little bit. I think there was like a problem with my internet. But I think I missed a little bit of the last part we were talking about. But I think just generally speaking in terms of participation, and I think Brian was mentioning that towards the beginning, he wasn't super involved or super active. I think even in those cases, there are ways that you can take advantage of your talents or the people to kind of make an effort. I think this is just drawing back on my experiences, but just with the website I developed and with the project I did over the summer. They're not directly related necessarily to the field of study that I'm in, but they were an opportunity to kind of push that boundary. So yeah, and just to clarify, I know someone asked asked a question about what the name of the website was. And there were a couple questions also about resource lists and stuff. So just to reiterate, there was the website we developed over summer was called act4.us. And I can put it in the chat again if you need, but yeah, so I think just mobilizing in any way you can, there's always benefit. So yeah.
Great. And Rachel, do you want to say something? Because you've been doing this work for at least a couple of years now. So what keeps you going, and what do you recommend to others who are talking to tons of voters and trying to get people engaged in the political process and registered? What keeps you going?
I think I heard a phrase once that was like, you have to have the attitude of a golden retriever and the memory of a goldfish. And that's kind of like what I like to keep in mind as I'm doing this work. You have a lot of nasty interactions out there. You just have to keep going and push through it, and keep going as hard as you can. And it's definitely hard when this work is my paid job that I do full time and takes up most of my personal life as well. So knowing when to draw the line and take some time out for myself is very important. But yeah, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. So yeah.
That's great. Well, I just want to thank you all. I wish you could hear the applause that I'm sure will be coming through from the participants. This has been incredibly informative, enlightening, inspiring, and motivating. It just reminds me of what an honor and a pleasure it is to teach at Duke with such wonderful students and colleagues and be part of such a vibrant community in Durham. So thank you all so much. Again, if you'd like more information or you want to get involved, you can contact Rachel at You Can Vote. The website's very easy to find. You can contact Emily Stewart at the Duke Human Rights Center, or any member of the team that is working with Gunther Peck at the Democracy Lab. And I hope that we will all take this information from tonight, share it with others. The recording will be available, information will be available, and let's all do what we can to each go out there and maybe find 3 friends, in the next 24 hours and say, can you get involved? Will you volunteer with me? Will you register voters? Because this election really matters. And if we all start doing that and it snowballs, we can achieve this. I'll say one last thing about early voting that actually Erica shared with me recently, and I think it's a really good rule of thumb for deciding about this. Basically, the maxim was, if you feel comfortable going to the grocery store, you should be early voting if you're here and you can, because there is going to be so much pressure on this election, on the mail-in system, from people who really can't, people who are in nursing homes, people are, home with immunocompromised conditions, et cetera. But if you can get out and do some of the other stuff of your life, like grocery shopping, early voting is a really important thing to do. And you can do that at Duke at the Alumni Center beginning on October 15th and for that whole 17-day period. And by your doing that and encouraging your friends and colleagues and others in your community to do that early on, it relieves pressure all the way through the system and makes it more likely that we will actually get results by Election Day, and that we will have the kind of turnout we need to make sure that this election has integrity and is robust and leaves Americans all feeling like their voices have been heard and the process has been fair. So thank you all very much. I hope you'll check out all the organizations involved, and a special thank you to Bryant and Mohammed and Lauren and Rachel for joining us and speaking so beautifully. Good night, everyone.
Good night. And I'm going to throw out one more thing before people turn off.
Great.
You can also phone bank. We forgot to throw that out there, but phone banking is something you can do from home.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.